We're here with Tina Charles, WNBA athlete and Olympic level athlete, and now festival level filmmaker. She made a documentary about her father, Rawlston Charles, who started a record store in Bed-Stuy that had an enormous impact on the musical world of the United States. What a beautiful father-daughter portrait. It was really a love letter, I think, to your dad. Also, I'm curious, you must have learned so much about your dad in the process of making the film. So what are some things you learned about yourself in the process?
As far as what I learned about myself, I just brought myself to another level, to be able, took courage to do what I did. I didn't go to UConn for film. I went there for psychology and criminology. I stepped outside of my comfort zone, and it just shows when it comes to women athletes, especially WNBA players, there's so many different layers to us. There's so many other things that we do besides putting the ball in the basket. And the fact that I was able to step outside my comfort zone and make a film, and for it to land in Tribeca Film Festival, all I can say is just God is good, and honestly, it's just really credit to my dad. It's really my dad's story that got it into Tribeca. I was just the one that decided to do his story.
How about psychology and criminology? How does that factor into your day-to-day?
I don't think it factors into my day-to-day. I mean, obviously with the world and what's going on now, of course, being a criminology major, I definitely see some things. But outside of that, I mean, it's just back up.
Maybe taking the time to expand your perspective in these other subjects help open you up to be able to tell a story like your father's in a
No, that was just, honestly, it was just all God. It was all my faith. All I did was prayer. I'm a God-fearing woman, and I just prayed for the wisdom and discernment to be able to tell the story the right way, to have the creativity to lay it out, adding in animation into the story, to tell my dad's story for the coverage so there wouldn't be too many talking heads and all those things. It was really God in me that allowed me to portray that in the film.
You're only a fraction of your dad's age, but you've already accomplished so much. What do you think it is about your family that creates such an enormous amount of drive and ambition? Is it your dad, do you think, that's part of the reason you're pushing yourself and trying to find new challenges?
I could definitely say I'm just a person where I didn't want to just be known for basketball. It's what I do, it's not who I am. There's other avenues that I have many interests in. I love serving others, and me creating this film allowed me to serve others, and that's how my father was. He wanted to serve his culture of Trinidad and Tobago, where he's from, and promoting the music of Calypso and soca music, that genre, to the world, and that's exactly what he did with his record store, for Caribbean immigrants to have access to the music when they came over to America. And that's what he did with his record label, to make it one of the most prominent music labels, Charlie's Records, for the genre of Calypso and soca music. So my father and I, we have many similarities as far as how we go about things and wanting to impact. So that's something that I always want to do, is just continue to impact those that are around me with the platform that I have playing in the WNBA. The impact I wanted to have is just to show that what immigrants mean to this world, what immigrants mean to America, being the climate that we're in today. My mother, she's from Kingston, Jamaica. My dad's from Trinidad and Tobago. And with what my father has done, again, for the culture of Trinidad and Tobago, it's second to none. It's amazing. Trinidad and Tobago needs to do something for my father, give the National Honor Award to him for just all that he's done. And when you're speaking of the American dream, he bought into America. That's the reason why he's still there on Fulton Street in Northside, in Brooklyn. His record store is still there and available to those that want to be home. It provides a home away from home. So my father has a lasting impact, and that's something that I want to exemplify when I'm done playing. I don't want to just be known for Tina was a good WNBA basketball player, but she did X, Y, and Z, and that's what my father is.
When you say he bought into America, what do you mean?
My father migrated over in December 1967. That was 3 years after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and there was many riots, and Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn was not a place that anyone wanted to be. And so the mayor at that time was trying to get people to come back into the community. And my father, when you're thinking about immigrants and when you're in a stage of survival, a lot of Caribbean immigrants, they take in small businesses. And my father took that risk in having Charlie's Calypso City right there in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And he bought that building and the one next to his, and he took a risk. And so when I'm saying buying into America, like that's the American dream, is to take ownership. And that's what my father did, and he had that mindset at a very early age when he did that. I'm born and raised in Queens, New York. I mean, for my father, definitely. With the climate we're in today, with everything that President Trump is talking about, I always think about my parents, and that's something that motivated me to want to tell the story of how my father migrated over, of what his story was, landing in JFK, nobody being there to pick him up, him going to a home, them taking him in. I think that resonates with a lot of individuals in America, and then just to see where he is today and what he's done. I mean, like I said, I think immigrants mean the world.
Right, it's kind of a message about life after immigration too, and what the next generation can achieve, and a testament to the power of opening yourself to other cultures and the cultural exchange.
Exactly. Definitely that. My father, when we were making this, that's probably it wasn't even about his record label for him. It was like he could finally tell his story. He's sitting back watching the news and seeing what's going on, seeing how, certain countries and individuals are banned from coming into America. He couldn't imagine if he was banned from coming into New York and not being able to do what he's done. So he definitely wanted that message to be portrayed in the film.
I have to say I wasn't very familiar with Calypso or soca music before the documentary, but then I realized that I was after the fact. There's so many familiar songs and stuff that you would... and then I didn't realize what an influence your father had on hip-hop. Yeah, it's America's #1 music genre today, and it's crazy that this came from kind of the cross-fertilization of immigrants and... infusing with parts of our culture, yeah.
Right, yeah, definitely. That was one of the turning points for my father. When he wanted his music to sound like the American music, Calypso and soca, the quality of music. So he would always go to these Manhattan studios, the top ones, Right Tracks, Quad Studios, and then he decided to build his own studio, Rawlston Recordings, and that was in 1984, where the emergence of hip-hop was taking over, and that's when the likes of Kurtis and the Fat Boys, Run DMC, Dougie Fresh and those guys, Houdini, they were looking for a homegrown, studio, and that's what Rawlston Recording Studio provided. That's what my father provided, with him having the quality equipment, state-of-the-art equipment, a 24-track, a Neve board, and that allowed them to produce some of the major hip-hop songs that we have today.
He was going back and forth between the U.S. and Trinidad, right, to get some of the artist recordings and then make it into a 24-track kind of
so
production.
That's what he was doing with Calypso music. My father, he would go to have access to the music. He would go to Trinidad and he would go down there to hear and listen to what those arrangers were doing for the songs for the artists on his label, and then they would do that they only had 16 tracks in Trinidad, but then they would bring it up to New York, because they just had more equipment and put it on a 24-track, so they can add more instruments, add more different elements to the song, to make it that kind of fat sound, if you want to say. And my father had a great ear for it.
Cool. Diverting a bit to the filmmaking process, can you talk about how hard it was to make your first documentary?
It was extremely hard because I did everything on my own. If it was something that I learned throughout the process, is that individuals will project their fear on you. Because when you tell them what you're doing, it's something that they can't imagine themselves doing. And so for me personally, I just saw it as I had to take more onto my own. Because everyone believed in my father's story, but not everyone believed that I was capable of telling the story the right way. And so a lot of individuals or companies, production companies, didn't take a chance on EPing it or becoming an executive producer for me to do the story. So I became the executive producer. I was able to come into contact with Spike Lee, who supported me, just gave me confidence to do it. And then Jane Rosenthal, the co-founder of Tribeca, came into play, and she saw the film that I had created up to that point, and she saw what I was doing. She loved it, and she definitely helped me to curtail it to make sure the pace and the flowing of the film was going the right way.
Can you talk a little bit about your conversation with Spike and how he pushed you in the right direction?
Yeah, so I went to Players Tribune, and they introduced me to Spike Lee, and he does classes at NYU, and so for the film school. So he was so gracious to allow me to be able to sit there and, basically watch She's Gotta Have It and him teaching his students, why he did certain things. And I was able to have a one-on-one combo with him, and I said, hey, I would love for Charlie's Records to be a Spike Lee joint. He's from Brooklyn, right in Fort Greene, not too far from Bed-Stuy. And he knew my father, he grew up in that area, he knew Charlie's Calypso City. But the passion that I told him for the story I wanted to execute, he just heard the passion in my voice, and he told me that I had to be the one to tell my father's story, that I would be the only one who would care to get it right and make sure that it was told the right way. And so I walked out of there, stopped asking individuals for help, and just started doing everything on my own.
It did feel like a story that only you could have told.
Right.
Yeah, there was really a level of intimacy with some of the interviews in the movie.
Right.
I'm wondering if you were ever nervous about telling such a personal story and making it accessible to a bigger audience.
No, I wasn't nervous about it. I saw like how my father saw that the music needed to cross over to American audience, to make sure the quality of music was better, that it was something that needed to be done, like as if it was a calling for him. That's the way that I saw this. My dad told me that when God gives you an idea, he marries you to that idea, and history proves that it becomes great. For me, this idea that my best friend told me that I should do and take on the challenge of producing this film, I saw that it was needed for the culture. Right now, if you would go to Netflix or Hulu or anywhere, there's nothing on Calypso and soca music. So I knew that it was needed, so I didn't see it as anything overwhelming or anything like that. I was like, this is what I need to do. So.
Right, and it's a microcosm for a social dynamic and identity politics that I think a lot of people will relate to and appreciate.
Exactly.
So do you think you might make another film? Is this an experience
Definitely.
you really like?
This is the first film underneath 31 Enterprises. I'm definitely interested in making another film. I think there's so many other stories that need to be told, especially for us WNBA players. As like you said, I'm one of many that do many other great things off the court. And so I would love to tell my peers stories about the great things that they're doing and how they're impacting others. And there's other ideas that I have, but yeah, definitely I'm open to making another film.
What kind of similarities have you found between filmmaking and the rigor involved in being an athlete? And
just the hard work that it takes. The same way how I come into the gym early and, working on my game at the same time. It's not just your time, it's other people's time. You have the camera crew, you have the interview subject that's coming in, and you want them to be on time. Execution is very important. So there's definitely a lot of similarities or synergy as far as my approach on the court and my approach when I had to make this film and do interviews and having to travel. It's just not, you don't get it done by one person. I had help from Red House Visuals and Digital Bodega and Nico Quinto and, Jane Rosenthal of Tribeca. So it really takes a lot of people to finally have that perfect picture.
Well, it sounds like the right people believed in your idea, yourself included.
Yeah.
What did telling this story about your dad maybe inspire you to want to do down the line? Are there other types of stories you think you want to tell?
Yeah, I believe there's other unsung heroes out there like my father. There's many unsung heroes, especially in the Caribbean, for the music that they've done. And again, like I said, my mother's from Jamaica, so tapping into there and seeing who else's voice needs to be heard or who else's story needs to be heard. So me, I'm a big fan of documentaries and stories that are told. And so the only change now for me is that when I watch documentaries on Netflix, now I watch it as a director versus just enjoying it. I notice the different coverages that they do, the transitions that they do into a next scene. It's just all different now, but it's cool.
It sounds like a good learning experience.
Yeah. Definitely.
What are some of your favorite films?
Well, during the time I was watching Quincy that Rashida Jones did, and that's something that inspired me to want to continue to do Charlie's Records, because she did basically her story on her father and his impact and being an amazing arranger for so many amazing acts that we have today in the music world. And watching that and seeing how she was able to execute that and not only show what Quincy did in the music world, but just his character as a person. That's what I wanted to reflect, just the character of my father as well.
Can't think of a better reference.
Really able to tell a story of the importance of Calypso and soca music, and just who my father is, Rawlston Charles, and just what he did as an immigrant migrating over, and just think the sky's the limit.
Cool. Awesome.